Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us today. Thank you so much for joining our meeting today for Future Capital. As you can see on the screen, Co-Creating Conscious Economies. Today, we're going to spend a little time with the 2000 year in review and the 2021 look ahead. So as you're joining, if this is your first time, thank you so much. And for those of you that have joined us before, welcome back. We know that these days with Zoom, we have a lot of choices in meetings. So thank you for investing the time with us today. We have an amazing 90 minutes to present today and to share with you. And then we invite all of you to join us for our happy half hour, where we look forward to seeing you and hearing you. We'll make sure that you all have that in the chat. We'll put that in the chat momentarily to join us immediately following. But today we have joining us some of our partners at WAS, our partners at the United Nations, Will Kennedy and Chantaline Carpentier. So we'll wait a few more minutes and then we're going to kick everything off.
Good morning, Mr. Kennedy.
Good morning, Mr. Ford. Heather, how are you?
Good morning, blessed. How are you?
Good, thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for joining. I see Sergio joining as well. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, fantastic. Let's dive right in as the attendees, as you all start to join. We cannot see you and cannot hear you. For the next 90 minutes, we have a beautiful presentation to talk about reflecting the year in review and a look ahead. And we personally want to invite you after for our happy half hour. And I'll make sure that we put the link in the chat button. But we have some of our partners as well as some of our working groups that are going to be talking about the amazing action and things that are cooking up with Future Capital. But I'd like to hand it immediately to Jyoti Ma for a blessing. Jyoti, thank you so much for joining us today.
It is my privilege and my pleasure to be able to be with you all today. So is it time for that blessing now, or should we wait a little longer for others? How do you want this to flow?
I think it's a perfect, if I had to guess, Lawrence, I know you want to speak. I think it's a perfect time to dive right in for a blessing, but I'm going to pass it over and see what Lawrence.
I think it's great. We see a quick pause here is probably good for a couple seconds because we had over 200 people register and I see a lot of people flying in at the last minute. So, but I think it's probably a great time, Jyoti. So why don't we take it away and off to you.
Okay, very good. So if everyone could just take a moment and sit down right in the very center of themselves, that center located near the solar plexus of our bodies. And we'll make a collective breath and join in our centered there together. And now if you'll just take a moment and sit in your stillness and allow the intelligence that lives in that stillness to enter into this work that we have in front of us today so it can inform us and direct us. Good morning, Mother, Father, God. This is Jyoti. I'm sitting here offering this prayer from the sacred territory of the Pomo and the coastal Miwok peoples. I'm sending up a prayer of gratitude to you for this beautiful day. I'm giving thanks for the morning star that announced this day was coming and the sun that brought its light so we could stand up inside this day and call our full presence into place. We are living in such unprecedented times, Creator. I know you're stirring them with all that is afoot right now So much is falling down and so much is breaking through simultaneously. We're here just coming out after celebrating this spring equinox with you, this time when light and dark stood equal with itself, and we were moving into the light, into the sun, into the longer days of light. And so I give you great thanks. I give you great thanks that there is an ancestor's hand on every shoulder of everyone gathered here, and they are guiding us and protecting us and lighting our way. I give great thanks that our original peoples have been able to bring a line unbroken through great challenges, but their courage and their heart and their resilience brought that line unbroken to sit here at this world table today that you have called. For in their prophecies, they prepared us for these times, and now those prophecies are instructing us in these times. And what they're telling us is that it's time for all nations to gather at this world table, and that every single one of us coming to the table has been preparing a thread that has run through their families and their family lines and the decades leading up to this time, so that that thread could be announced at the table, identified at the table. And then this line unbroken that our original people bring to the table will instruct the weaving of this new tapestry for life that we are all here to celebrate and to serve. It won't be revealed in these few new days in front of us, but with time it will be, and it is something that is opening a door like never before. For the earth herself is in an ascension process. She is moving with us into the heart of all that is, into a time where we can sit at the table out of respect for one another, where we can return to the original principles of reciprocity and collaboration and unity and heart, and all life is sacred. When this time and this way of life is restored, then balance will return to this Mother Earth. That is for sure. We've all been called and we've all answered. And that's why we're here in this creative circle of amazing people that have a devotion to life and to that which will follow them into life. For at this point, as a grandma, I'm thinking so much of my grandchildren right now. I'm thinking about a life that they might be stepping into. I want to be sure that they can swim in clean water and breathe clean air and walk in safe spaces on this planet, this beautiful Mother Earth. I'm thinking of the Mother Earth and her family, for she travels through the universe with the stars and the moon and the sun and the planets revolving around her. She moves through the cosmos in a dance of life and evolution, and we're a part of that dance. Let us stay humble as we approach this day and this conversation. Let us stay mindful with our words and our deeds. Let us walk out of a box that locked us into something and separate us from the nature of who we are. For when we come back to understanding we're part of nature, we are nature herself walking, then we walk with a different mindset, and our hands and our actions and our hearts lead us to different ways. So it is my humble grandmother moment that I am really offering this prayer at the feet of the grandmother, they said, that's dreamed us into being and is still dreaming us today. Let us put this prayer as an offering at her feet. Let us remember her, for when we do, we'll remember ourselves. I give great thanks, Creator, for all that are here and the beautiful creative weaving that we are about to witness. Let it be so. Let it be so. Let it be so.
T, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for
Thank
that beautiful blessing today. For all of you that are not familiar with Jyoti, she is the founder of The Fountain and a extraordinary, amazing friend of Conscious Capital, and much, much more. Thank you, Jyoti, for joining. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Heather Desjardins. I'm the Chief Experience Officer for Conscious Capital, but I really believe that role bleeds over to Future Capital when we talk about experience and the heart and soul and maintaining really the heart of Future Capital. That's the role that I'm proud to play for Future Capital with their leadership team. Patty?
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. By way of introduction, I guess I'd just like to say I started out as a chiropractor, which gave me a holistic systems perspective, which I applied to my career in information technology, where I built large-scale data systems on Wall Street for development banks around the world. And about 2002, I co-founded an incubator, and since then, I've been involved in many endeavors focused on changing the global economy to work in alignment with life and for benefit of all. So also as a lifelong meditator, I teach a program in the art of conscious attention through mindfulness practices. I am particularly interested in the power of our attention relative to our time spent online. And I'm working now to raise awareness about the impact and possibility of the attention economy. So happy to be here. Lawrence?
I am Lawrence Ford, and I am delighted to be here, and I am even more delighted to see the amount of participants and all of you that have chosen to join us today. And my work is with the leadership with Future Capital, and I work with transformation of consciousness and also in the capital markets. Off to you, Steve, I believe, or to Mark.
Actually, to me.
There we go. There you go, Mark.
My name is Mark Sloss. I have the distinct honor right now to be serving a term as the executive director of the Future Capital Initiative. I'm also a partner at Wild Capital Management and the founder of Regenerative Investment Strategies. I'm about mid-career in a journey towards a more sustainable and inclusive form of capitalism, which is why I'm here with everybody today. I'm also involved in a new charitable venture called Music for Climate Justice, which will be taking place concurrent with COP26. Hopefully that will actually go off in November. And we'll be talking more later in the hour. Steve.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm Steve Sheath, and it's great to see so many friends who have joined us this morning. This is awesome. I'm a proud member of the Future Capital leadership team and a almost 40-year veteran of the financial services industry, where I did the crazy thing 31 years ago of embracing the radical notion that investors could consciously direct investment capital in a manner to achieve both financial goals as well as perhaps help create a better world. The language has evolved and changed over time, and now we talk about sustainability, a truly sustainable future, a just and sustainable future, a future that works for everyone. That's kind of what we're all about here. My motto personally is onward and upward. For those of you that know me, get my emails or visit my little thrize.com website, onward and upward, which is an amazingly accurate reflection of how Future Capital is working to be in the world. It's because we're all in this together. And at this point, I feel like I have to at least acknowledge the fact that I'm sitting in Boulder, Colorado this morning, where many of us are still reeling from the mass shooting that occurred here on Monday afternoon, just a few blocks from where my daughter and grandson live. And it's been a tough, unsettling 40 hours or so. Swirling thoughts and feelings of peace awoke me at 5:30 this morning. And I remembered a powerful quote from one of my favorite philosophers, Jimi Hendrix, that I'd like to share with you. He said, "When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace." Perhaps this can serve as a theme for the rest of our time together today. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Because in a very real sense, future capital is about bringing love into the conversation, into the room, into every resource or capital allocation decision that we make as a society. Future Capital is a service organization. We're in service to a better world. The vision, mission, values, the community, the potential of Future Capital live in the space between human consciousness, one of the most powerful forces in the universe, and the tools that we as human beings have created to power human society, commonly known as capital. We are committed to activating the power at the nexus of consciousness and capital for the purpose of societal transformation. It's clear to me that the status quo of disinvesting from harmful things is no longer sustainable. In fact, over the past year, we all have felt the pain of broken systems personally as our communities faced multiple crises, the pandemic, a renewed reckoning with racial injustice, climate change, economic hardship, political strife, and senseless mass shootings. The need for new ways of organizing our society, new ways of educating and learning and investing has never been more pressing. It's clear that now more than ever, we need to consciously prioritize directing our capital to improve our systems and catalyze a shift to a truly equitable, low carbon, regenerative economy. In short, our task is to heal society and identify a new path forward toward a future that works for all humanity, all life. Future Capital superpowers are convening, collaborating, incubating, and supporting systems change. And this group convened now today is a beautiful reflection of how Future Capital brings together diverse richly experienced and highly qualified individuals from business and finance, arts and science, academia, and the world's wisdom traditions for the purpose of identifying high potential actions that serve the common good. We do this with love, with compassion, with shared purpose and service to a better world, a just world, a world that works for everyone, a world that honors, cherishes, and supports all life. Lawrence, I hope that's been a sufficient kind of backdrop for for the next piece of this and for the rest of our conversation today with this incredible community.
Thank you, Steve. That's perfect. And today, what we're going to do is you're going to hear a lot of the background of how this formed. And by the end of our time together today, it'll be very clear to you about what we're all about and how you can participate. And as Heather had mentioned earlier, we're also going to give, if you do have the time at the end of this call, a happy half hour, we call it, to come join us so your voice can be heard and see how you can contribute. I do have some prepared remarks because we have an internal joke here about me being brief. So I'm going to behave today because I can get pretty excited about this work we're all doing together. But we have an economic system that is a benefit to less and less people as the separation of wealth expands. And any system out there where too many people feel they're not participating or feel excluded will ultimately rebel against itself. And that's really what we're seeing today in our capital system. But the economic system is not the problem. It's lifted millions from poverty. The question is, how do we improve the current system? What are the systemic changes that we need to make? From my perception, there's really three things. Number one is we need to decarbonize the global economy. The technology is available, the proof is there, and then move to a more circular, regenerative economy. Second is we need to move financial markets to the longer term. We need to shift our myopic short-term mentality and shareholder primacy that keeps us from addressing these longer-term issues and move to longer-term views. We need to reframe, number three, really, we need to reframe how we view capital and make the system more empowering and inclusive. We can lead a movement, one that puts people's purpose, their reason for being here, as the highest valued capital, and evolve our system to include everyone, all stakeholders, including the earth and all of its creatures. But in order to do that, we need to shift our consciousness. We need to evolve from a tribal or wealth awareness to a humanity awareness, as Richard Barrett speaks of in his evolution of consciousness model. As we emerge from another third season, a wake up from this pandemic, let's remember all the souls that have passed and the families that have been affected, and for all the pain, including the lives lost, as Steve was just talking about, in the recent Boulder shootings, as well as Atlanta. But let's also remember the light and the gift of this third season wake up that reminds us that we are all interconnected, from our breath to the global markets. We are joined today with two of our partners from the United Nations. And the United Nations is the sacred ground from which Future Capital was born and firmly plants its feet. The United Nations is a sacred ground which is a beacon for peace, the place from which the Sustainable Development Goals were formed, a place that was created with the sacred duty to uphold the human rights of citizens above all powers, to remind us that the true power is inside each of us, not fleeting external powers that come and go. It is our individual and collective consciousness that drives our actions in the world. As the shamans say, we literally dream our world into being, as Jyoti was mentioning at the beginning of this call in her prayer. So what do I mean by consciousness? And what do we mean by consciousness? It's probably best stated in the preamble of the Constitution of UNESCO, which declares that since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that defenses of peace must be constructed. So these times call for all of us to come together, not against each other and not to compete. If we are to solve this problem, it's going to take a diverse group of stakeholder representation like this in Future Capital. Academia to artists to private banking, public banking, indigenous wisdom, like-minded groups, to all come together to collaborate, convene, and incubate new systems-based actions out into the world. That is why we are here, and that is what we do, and we're so happy you're here on this journey with us. I would like to hand it over to my dear friend, Will Kennedy, who you'll hear a little bit later on, and maybe we'll mention it a little bit, but this was really the impetus of this entire initiative in our famous meeting in San Diego, Will. Over to you, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, and thank you so much to the Future Capital leadership team for your extraordinary efforts in manifesting the mission, the essential mission, the vital mission of Future Capital, and in also facilitating, I think, the meaningful engagement and activation of such an extraordinary, amazing group of both thought and practice leaders at the intersection or nexus of capitalism and consciousness. I got pulled into this when back in 2015, when 193 governments unanimously approved the 17 Sustainable Development Goals for humanity and the planet. I was struck by the fact that the UN really had not effectively been engaging capital markets at the intersection of capital, consciousness, and driving shared value solutions to these huge global problems. And so I spent 2015 and 2016 and a lot of my off hours just reading about impact investing and sustainable investing in ESG. And I was really, really inspired by it and also somewhat confused by it, if I'm honest. But about 10 years ago, I'd heard Raj Sisodia speak at the UN. He spoke about a vision for conscious capitalism. And it was so inspiring and so moving and so fundamentally important. I couldn't imagine why the United Nations wasn't convening this stakeholder group around these questions. And so at the invitation of Steve and the encouragement of a friend, Amber Nystrom, I went to the SRI conference in San Diego in 2017, I think it was. We had the good fortune of meeting Lawrence Ford and being exposed to this broader ecosystem of extraordinary humans who are thinking about how you direct capital for to support a more inclusive and conscious economic models that can deliver prosperity and sustainability for all the world's citizens and to protect nature and the Earth's ecosystems at the same time while generating a return. After that conference, I had the good opportunity to spend some time with Lawrence Ford, and I had never met a guy like Lawrence Ford, and I'm sure most of you who know Lawrence Ford can understand why I'd never met a guy like that. And so I was very inspired by his work and by his vision, by his belief in what the United Nations represented. And, you know, my day job is dedicated to just engaging non-state actors, civil society, the private sector, academic institutions around how we can align around a shared mission and work for a better world in a way that collectively advances the Sustainable Development Goals. So I reflected with him about the need that I felt there was for this to constitute some coalition of leaders in the capital market community writ large who cared deeply and had years of experience advocating for the allocation of capital for sustainability and for social impact, and just to see whether or not we could have a conversation around it and see what that led to. And in September of 2018, we had our first meeting of 50 extraordinary individuals that Lawrence and Heather and others pulled together. And it was one of the most inspiring conversations that I'd ever been a part of at the United Nations. And in a really, really accomplished, eclectic, passionate group of practice and thought leaders that attended. In 2020, I have been particularly inspired by the work that Ketan Patel is doing around his Future of Capital report, and also some work that Sergio Fernando de Cordova is doing around engaging family offices in support of post-COVID recovery. And I just want you to know that there is no coalition like Future Capital in the universe of the United Nations that I'm aware of. And that as we as a community talk about a shift from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism, I don't think that this initiative could be more timely or important. I'm going to go a little bit back to my written remarks now, just because I want to capture the urgency of this moment. Because as you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has magnified the extent of structural inequalities and vulnerabilities that exist in our societies. And by extension, there is just an urgent need for a value-based financial paradigm to help close the widening socioeconomic gap. The UN Secretary General has referred to the COVID-19 pandemic as one of the most dangerous challenges this world has faced in our lifetime, and has also demonstrated its fragility. Entire regions that are making progress on eradicating poverty and narrowing inequality have been set back years in a matter of months. And it is in this context that the Secretary General of the United Nations reminds us all the time that it's the Sustainable Development Goals that provide the framework for more inclusive and sustainable economies and societies, and that strengthening the economic and social rights of everyone is what we really need to bolster resilience for the long haul. So with that, I just want to say that, you know, I feel very blessed and grateful to be a part of this extraordinary group of humans. And thank you all for the vital work that you're doing and your shared commitment to Future Capital's essential mission.
Thank you, Will, and thank you for being part of this. And back at you, Will. For anybody who knows Will, you'll know why everybody knows he's such an extraordinary human being. and the work that he's been doing for years at the United Nations. So thank you, Will, for being that extraordinary beacon of light inside of that sacred place called the United Nations. Patty, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. My internet went out at the last minute, so I apologize for not being on video. But I wanted to speak a little bit about our timeline. And we created this timeline just as a reminder of where we started and what we've been doing since the beginning. And it's interesting because what it brought up for me is that we're operating both within and on the edge of this time dimension. So there are these milestones here we see on the screen, and then there's what happens in the space between. Like that's what future, acknowledging the depth of connection that's created in silence and what happens in the space between all of us. So we consciously honor that. And the Japanese have a word, yutori, that implies spaciousness. And so here we are in 2021, we began with this conversation between Will and Lawrence. And then we did a lot of work for about a year coming together to figure out how to launch this. And we had our first meeting at the UN in September of 2019. I'd like to hand it over to Heather to talk about that experience.
Patty, thank you so much. I want to just expand a little bit on something that Will said. Will said he never met a guy like Lawrence Ford. I hear often from individuals that come into contact, and yep, it's time for it to pause and chuckle a little bit with that, but I hear that quite often from individuals that come into contact with Conscious Capital Wealth Management. I've never seen an organization like you. I've never seen an investment company like you that leads with love. So when Lawrence came back from his meeting in San Francisco, we decided that we couldn't not really create this movement to help propel the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And let me tell you what happened. The phone started ringing off the hook. The energy was swirling, individuals were coming, and I'll tell you, we had to really make a tough decision. We were growing really fast as a firm, and we really had to make the decision that we needed to trust and lead with love. So our leadership team at Conscious Capital really said, this is something that we, our souls, and we're really called to do this. And we really did. We released it to the universe and really trusted. And out of that trust, we gathered for 2.5 days at the United Nations. It was just nothing short of just amazing. 50 of the most extraordinary individuals that are leaders in their sectors. What I had the pleasure of seeing is people at the highest level of their profession connecting at the deepest levels of their souls. It was just extraordinary. Chantaline Carpentier, thank you so much for joining. And one of the things, actually, I'll comment, what Chantaline said was she was standing there and she said that she was reminding us that one time Gandhi and Mother Teresa, who is my highest idol, walked the halls of the United Nations, and she had not seen the energy and the love that she sees in the group in front of her. And that was us at the United Nations. So I saw for 2.5 days just an extraordinary gathering of individuals that led with trust, that came to the United Nations for 2.5 days. Really interested in healing that connective tissue between consciousness and capital, and really just came with trust. And out of that, really the beginning of Future Capital was born. So it was just really amazing. I'm going to put it right back to Patty. I can go on and on, maybe at a later time, about the excitement of the 2.5 days and how extraordinary it was. But Patty, I'll put it right back to you to continue with our timeline.
Okay, thank you. So we launched Future Capital at the UN, but part of that journey was really meeting Gary Jacobs
I think we have a little bandwidth.
The World Academy of Arts and Sciences. When we met Gary,
Rob, oh, you know, maybe someone else should take over the timeline.
my situation. Lawrence, can you do that and introduce Gary?
Sure, I think you're back. Give it another shot, Patty. I think everybody can be a little patient because you come in and out, and if it happens again, I'll jump in.
Okay, so basically, I just really want to
back, you're good.
acknowledge, okay, the World Academy and Gary Jacobs and the World Academy and our partnership, our profound partnership, the event at the UN was the beginning. A few days later, we all convened again for 2 days at the World Bank up in Washington, D.C., and that was another extraordinary meeting of members from the World Academy, members who were at the UN event, and then other leaders from around the world. And then after that, within a month, Lawrence, you were in Seoul, and there was another meeting in Dubrovnik, I believe. So we started with this 20 and the pandemic. So we pivoted and we shifted over to our monthly conversations, with which most of you, many of you, we have joined us at our monthly conversations, and it's our way of convening and really bringing our community together and continuing to support the mission that we're on. We also recently began workshops in consciousness, and Gary and Richard Barrett started in February. Our Nalima Bhatt is going to be doing one in April, which we highly recommend you to join. And so we have this momentum of these convenings that we continue to support to further the cross section and the eclectic perspectives that we all need, because as Lawrence always says, each of us has to tap in and be operating from the purpose of why we are here. And if we're each operating from our purpose, then we can make these changes that we all need to see in the world. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Gary Jacobs to speak to us a little bit about the World Academy and our partnership.
Thank you, Patty, and great to be back with so many friends, and look forward to seeing you all who are not on the screen right now. Brief introduction for those who don't know me. I'm speaking from Pondicherry, South India, where I also did a crazy thing like Steve about 50 years ago. I dropped out of medical school, and my wife and I came and joined the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry. And I spent many years trying to understand what this nebulous thing consciousness is and how it expresses in life, first in Indian development. Then I became a business consultant for about 20 years, working with companies and seeing how consciousness could be used to build a better citizen and a more successful, sustainable business. And the last 15 years, I've been very active in the World Academy, where we're looking primarily at global challenges, the main global challenges around the world, and trying to look at real solutions, long-term but deep solutions that can really get us to a new paradigm where we're not constantly digging holes and creating problems for ourselves. The Academy is just at the tail end of finishing a 1.5-year project with the United Nations in Geneva we call Global Leadership in the 21st Century. And that has everything to do with the Future Capital Project. Lawrence and Katan and Chantaline and others, Frank Dixon, a number of others who are here on the program today have been very active contributors to it. And among the many issues that we're looking at, the global challenges that need to be addressed, there's no question that capital and economy and financial inequity is one of the core levers that we have to touch. Fortunately, Katan is on the agenda today, and he's going to talk to you about One very important side, what we consider very important, is what the private sector can do, what we can do to realign the way the private sector works, the way businesses work, and certainly the way private sector investment works. And Ketan ran a couple of really wonderful sessions for us at recent conferences with the UN on practical strategies to show what has been done and what can be done, and you'll hear from him. We have another project, our other colleague who's an active fellow member of the Future Capital, Stefan Brunhuber, who's been leading our project on what he calls the Tao of Finance, looking at how public sector finance could be substantially reoriented in a major way to change the rules on how money is being utilized and invested. And our last meeting was a 60-year anniversary of the Academy last month, which we call the planetary moment. And the goal of that meeting was, how do we convert this moment into planetary momentum? And for all of the suffering and misfortune that we've seen in the last 1.5 years, or 1 year really, I was thinking back to Trump before we had the pandemic. It started earlier, but for all of that, it's really remarkable how deeply the changes are also taking place. And one of the things we've seen breaking, which we thought would break 10 years earlier, was this fixation, this orthodoxy, or this mythology about not spending public money where it's really needed. And now the pandemic has broken down some barriers, impenetrable barriers, and taken money out of the place where it's been. And Stefan, through the Academy, we're working on ways in which really large amounts of money can be generated publicly for investment in the Sustainable Development Goals and for investment in consciousness raising sustainable activities that will really help us build a better future. Great to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And your partnership is precious, and reminded that it was, one of the earliest engagements. And I think back to our original days when we were having these phone calls with Mila, who's been on, I don't think is with us today, but tremendous person engaged with us and such a big help as we go forward. I'm also reminded to make sure that I make a call out to Amber Nystrom, Will, who you brought up as well, who was, the connecting princess of the world. And, she was the original Omega spark of this as well. So thank you, Gary, as always, and the World Academy. You're an incredible partnership. And that also, which Mark is now going to speak of, really starts to form a little bit of your understanding of how, when we talk about convening, collaborating, and incubating, there are a multitude of projects that are coming out of Future Capital that are aligned with Future Capital that we help collaborate with and incubate. And a couple we're going to be highlighting today. But thank you, Gary, for talking about some of the others as well. I appreciate it. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Larry. So I get the probably unenviable task of actually answering the question, okay, but what is it? So hopefully I can elucidate that a little bit in a few minutes' time. Let me wind back to the beginning of this call a little bit. You've heard the idea of systems invoked multiple times at this point. One of the foundational assumptions that we're operating with is that capitalism is a system that is neither good nor bad. It simply is. And it's a question of what you do with it. You can beat a sword into a plowshare. And in the case of capitalism, if you use it in a very extractive and punitive sort of way, it can be incredibly damaging to people on the planet. Or you can utilize the exact same system in a much more regenerative and inclusive way and take care of the planet on which we spin and elevate all of humanity. So this is not a debate about whether capitalism is in or out. We're kind of accepting that it is a useful tool. It is a useful system. It is now incumbent upon us to bring consciousness into the tent and utilize this system in a much more constructive way. And an important part of capitalism is the idea of free markets. And a marketplace is only as vibrant as the diversity of the participants that are involved in it. So the way we think about future capital is a very, very inclusive space. We want to convene everybody, and including convening the conveners. So it can be companies, it can be individual investors, it could be families, philanthropies, academics, think tanks, of course, our brothers and sisters in the indigenous communities, even representatives from government and non-governmental organizations. We need everybody, because the challenges we're trying to wrestle with here are truly global and all-inclusive. So we want to inhabit and really manifest the 17th SDG, partnerships for the goals. We want to bring everybody in and have these discussions and take these actions. So as Larry and others have invoked, we're thinking about the operations of the Future Capital Initiative in three ways, which is convening, which is a little bit of what we're doing here. Collaborating, which is bringing some of these participants and partners together to work together on some of the big challenges we face, which are illuminated and elucidated through the SDGs. And in certain cases, incubating as well. We want to be a place where it's a fertile ground for sprouting new ideas, launching new initiatives, publishing papers. Even if new companies or new NGOs grow out of this, we would consider that to be a success. If these are ways to actually advance what it is that we're trying to do and move towards a future version of capitalism, which really reflects what it is that we're talking about doing here, and doing it in a much more conscious way. And I think probably the best way to illustrate particularly the ideas of collaboration and incubation are to talk about a couple of the projects which have taken place over the last year or so that you saw on the timeline. So with that, I actually want to ask our dear friend and partner, Chantaline Carpentier, who is the head of the New York office of the UN Conference for Trade and Development, who's been just integral to the birth of this, but also to the incubation of some new ideas. So I'll invite her in now to talk a little bit about UNCTAD and one of the key things that was spawned out of this.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Glad to know, Lawrence, that our friend Amber is there as well. And I have some other friends I've invited. I think our family is growing real quickly. So thank you for convening us. It's a pleasure to be here for several reasons, because I'm amongst friends, but also I'm amongst people that have the ability and the willingness to change the world for a better place. So, and having the core, the SDG at the core of our work. So this is a great, I have a lot of gratitude for that. As Heather was mentioning when I finally was able to come in, we did, this whole thing started when I met Lawrence, thanks to my good friend Will Kennedy at the Office for Partnership at the UN. And we had a lunch and we start conceiving this whole idea. And then we had the meeting on September 11th outside the UN, and then we brought the meeting to the UN. And I had insisted, because there was a limited group of about 50 people, and I insisted with Lawrence that my friend Catan had to be there. And then Lawrence understood after that why Catan needed to be there. And you will understand, all of you, why Catan needed to be there once he speak on the Capital as a Force for Good project that we completed a report, and now we're having actually one-on-one phone calls with every one of these 60 largest financial institutions around the world. Once we've established a floor of what is it to be a good financial institution, and what is it that they're doing on ESG, SDGs, and beyond. And so that's on the one hand. There's real fruit coming out and real product coming out of this. This is not a talk shop. This is a do shop. And then the second part is we're seeing, and Ketanu is going to speak more elaborately on this, but we're seeing huge demand for co-product, and continuation of this. from these financial institutions. And this whole idea of future capital is very powerful, and the force for good is also very powerful. So you put the two together, and it's extremely appealing to people. I know I don't have a lot of time, so I want to jump quickly because we also, so that's one piece, and Katan's going to speak to that. But let me just tell you quickly that the reason why UNCTAD is interested in this. So UNCTAD is the UN Conference on Trade and Development, created in '64 by developing country at a conference on trade and development. That's what we call conference, because developing country were realizing that the economic system that we have just doesn't work. They can't develop with this economic system. And so basically they created the G77 a few months later, which is the group of 77 countries that they were at the time. Now we have 133 of them because of decolonization mostly, not because there's more poor countries. And basically they asked UNCTAD to be maintained as an institution within the UN to be working on trade and development issues, as well as finance, technology, and enterprise. And this is our mandate. And we support developing countries to take, on the one hand, take advantage of the international markets, and on the other hand, to not suffer from globalization. So it's on both sides. And we are one of the major institutional stakeholders with the World Bank, the IMF, and the WTO, and this on this process at the UN called the Financing for Development, which is now, as one old part is called Financing for Sustainable Development, that as means of implementation to achieve the SDGs, as well as these original commitment of developed countries towards the developing countries to support them in the development process, because there's absolutely no rationale why there should be poor people right now or poor nations. It's only because we have an economic system that delivers for the few at the expense of the majority and the planet. And as you said, Mark, and I'll conclude on that, there are alternative economic model, or within the mainstream of economics, there are some offshoot that actually can help us go there. And I'm happy to say that Patty, who is one of the main organizers here, as is a co-crime partner in bringing to the UN this new work stream called the New Economics for Sustainable Development. And so there we look at the blue economy, the green economy, the orange economy, which is the creative economy, purple economy, which is the care economy, frugal innovation, social solidarity economy, and attention economy. And I'm very glad to say that this morning we had the meeting with the chief economist of the UN and all of the UN network of economists, so from countries to region entities to the global. We were 85 economists from the UN system, and we discussed the first 2 pagers on each of these alternative economic model. And then the question is, how do we put them together as building block for new economics for sustainable development? And I really hope that the future of capital and you guys can be part of this journey. Already Patty is talking about creating a working group that could be the link, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chantaline. Let's invite Katan in to talk a bit about the Force for Good working group and the outcome.
That's great. Thank you. What a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. I feel like I've been mentioned too many times to get away with not saying much, Mark. Where did it all come from? I guess it came from that initial event that we all met. That was an inspiring event, and it really shows the convening power of the UN and a big idea, future capital, to say, could we all get together and think about the future of capitalism itself? I think something good came out of it also because there were such good people there. And it was so wonderful to meet those people and to interact with them and to talk. The idea that came out that I ended up leading was, could we get the finance industry to look at the system of capitalism, talk about the good things they're doing to change it, create a competitive tension between financial institutions so that we could drive a movement almost in capitalism to do good in the world. And so we phrased the term Force for Good. We wrote a report about it after engaging 63 financial institutions. We'd been working away at the idea for a little while, and then really in July, August 2020, we began getting in touch with these financial institutions. And 30 of them were engaged in a very active dialogue with us, and we took data from 63. So we ended up building the biggest database, I think, for the idea of something called Force for Good, which encompasses three things: ESG, sustainability, and stakeholders. And the underlying values are mindful conduct, caring for the planet, and compassion for all. Now, when you take 63 of the largest financial institutions in the world representing $100 trillion, I can't tell you that they represent those values. In fact, the first difficult part is, can you get them to engage and share the data and really give us the quality of information we needed? And we had a really fantastic steering group with some oversight and really active involvement from Chantaline and her colleague, Will Kennedy. The steering group had people who really know ESG and sustainability, but also really understand finance and business and systems change too. So we had your friend, Catherine Collins, Lawrence and Mark, Steve Lovnick, Frank Dixon, Terry Molnar. And so you had some very interested, committed people who wanted to see if finance could make a statement about the direction of big change. The 63 institutions were enthusiastic. They did engage, 30 very actively, and we built this huge database of information. And as we extract from it, what we find is the finance industry, of course, is an industry that makes money from money, and that builds a certain kind of culture. But amongst the leading institutions, you had a subset that really wanted to do good in the world. And the people they'd taken who had done all the things that you might imagine they would do initially, recasting what they did as good and so on, had moved well on. And so these organizations were developing, I think, what we can only describe as a new DNA. They want to be responsible custodians of financial assets. They want to look at real risks. They want to be shock and crisis proof. They want to contribute to the global community. They're ambitious for how they do that. They want to pick the SDGs that they think they can make a huge impact on. These include big issues of diversity and climate change, mass inclusion, reaching out to peoples who are not participating in the formal economy and getting those involved, providing housing, employment, worthwhile employment where you get well paid, and so on. So we found that inside the largest institutions were huge projects of change that they were financing. And so we were able to take all of that and draw out the common ground, a bar, if you like, that others would have to cross in the industry to be industry leaders. We were also able to define how new ground is breaking, and who's doing that, and what are the levers they're pulling to do that. And the third thing we could also see is the trend line. And what was really interesting was that trend line says that finance as an industry sees itself as one of the leaders of big change in the world. And they will finance that big change. They have a big transition to make though, because today probably 10% of their finance is ESG and sustainable and stakeholder driven. And so of the trillions of dollars out there, although the transition has begun, it's a long road to actually finishing the job. But out of $100 trillion that we looked at, all of that is becoming ESG compliant, ESG integrated fully. The more ambitious part, of course, is for them to finance this big change. And many of the SDGs are still outstanding to finance. Something like $20 trillion probably needs to be financed in the next 10 years. And you would have thought with $300 trillion, that should be easy. But the regular the stakeholder history is all still a barrier to this big change. But I think what we established was the beginning of the movement, the inner circle of 30 of the largest financial institutions in the world, drawn from all over the world, that want to make this change happen. And out of that was born the idea of Force for Good as a platform that would continue to do that work. And in that regard, Lawrence, Chantaline, the others that convened, and particularly Lawrence wanting to be somebody who could convene, could incubate and support, and allow things to just fly off and flourish. That's what I saw. I saw that generosity to help things happen, see them fly off and take shape. And I think we have something now very powerful that's taking shape with all the support. And the link with the World Academy was so important. The support from people like Gary to really put this on the stage, showcase it at the UN forums that they were working with, show the interlinkages between all these groups of good people. So it was just a real privilege to be involved. That's what I saw. Thank you. Did I miss something, Mark?
No, that's it. Thank you, Ketan. And for those of you who don't have your chat box open, if you have a look, Gil Friend was good enough to include the link to the Force for Good website where you can download the entire report, or you can have a look at the executive summary. Some really compelling information there, and we can appreciate it. It's a job well done, but it's also a work in progress. Let's bring Patty back in to take us through the work on the attention economy now.
Thank you, Mark. And I want to bring Chantaline up because I can't be on video. So let's have Chantaline come in. Last September, during the virtual summit that we held, I did a short talk on the attention economy because I saw how important it was to the world and how central it is to the mission of Future Capital. And being someone who has been steeped in understanding data and the use of data, and also teaching the art of conscious attention, it just seemed like a natural for me to kind of take this on. Chantaline and I spoke in about a month or two later, and she asked for a paragraph describing the attention economy, and she submitted it into the UN network of economists, and they agreed that it was something that they should take up and focus on. So this has been a rapid journey, and I really appreciate Chantaline's partnership and her advocacy for this really important topic. And I mean, back in '71, Herbert Simon coined the term attention economy in a paper where he wrote, "A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention." And if we think about all the information available to us, now what's the scarce commodity is our attention. And it's actually become the newest raw material being exploited through online media, especially. It's become monetized as a commodity, and most of us have no understanding of that or idea of how it's monetized. It impacts society by promoting addiction, narcissism, and polarization, because the technology is using our behavior, the data collected from our behavior online, to create algorithms to continue to increase our scrolling, clicking, liking, commenting, and keep our attention. So I believe it's a really important, influential aspect of our future. And I think there was a quote by a gentleman, Samuel Cronin, who said, "If our perception itself is formed by these media, it will take something truer and deeper to loosen their grip on our souls." So I want to bring Chantaline in, because Chantaline and I both share this vision that, yes, it's important to look at the issues, and there's considerable issues, especially around data privacy, ownership, the ethics. Should algorithms even influence our behavior for commercial gain, and things like that. But Chantaline and I both really support a positive view of what's possible. We've seen what the power of this technology, but what is possible in the future, engaging individuals' attention with respect and acknowledging their right to choose, and to support health and well-being, which could be designed into algorithms. It could be designed into social engagement models and business models to create a sustainable economy. So Chantaline, do you want to come on and talk a little bit about the attention economy? And
Sure. Thank you, Patty. as most of you, when Patty mentioned this the first time, I was puzzled, and I had to think about it afterward. And then, yeah, as she said, I reached out and wanted to see if we could draft something. And Patty has been very active in the UN group with us, one of the few non-UN economists to contribute to this. And so for us, what's interesting is so there's the ethic of it on the one hand, and the second is the relationship to SDG 3 on well-being and health, but also the linkages to SDG 12 on sustainable consumption and production. Right now, these frontier technologies are being used to make us do things that is actually deleterious to the environment and to our own health. Could it be used to nudge us in an ethical way in the right direction to make it? Because we all know the problem with sustainable consumption and production is change in behavior. Could that be a source of help to change behavior so that we feel better about ourselves? We know exercise is better for us, but sometimes we just don't do it. We know eating well is better for us, but we don't always do it. So could this be a force for nudging us in the right direction, as opposed to now nudging us to just spend more money or attention on something that is not even beneficial to us? So that's where, but we also want to link it to the idea of non-competition. So the lack of competition in the market right now, where these platform control something like 75% of the whole e-commerce and online data, as well as the competition and taxation of and what's the fair reward for our attention, and the ethic of most people do not know our data is being used when you go online. And so how do we make sure there's more transparency into this? So these are the areas that, and Patty and I will keep the group informed as to how we proceed in going forward with the UN Economist Network. Over to you.
Thanks, Chantaline. Yes, so we're going to be launching a working group that Future Capital will sponsor, which will be a multi-stakeholder group to address all the many different dimensions of this, and that's going to be happening in the next coming weeks. So if this is something that you've been actively engaged in and are interested, feel free to reach out to me. And it's so important to strike the right balance between our human attention and the enhanced computational capacity of technology. Technology is a fabulous benefit to our society, but I think that we're now, into some gray areas about how we're using it and what's happening. And I think it's really important that we recognize this. And as Future Capital, given our mission is this understanding and integrating this connective tissue between consciousness and capital, this is right at the center and at the heart of what we're interested in doing. So super excited that the UN is engaged in this. And thank you so much, Chantaline, for your partnership.
Thank you, Chantaline. Thank you, Patty. Before we get to our third incubation collaboration project that we're going to highlight today, I want to remind everybody that we know you're out there, because we know who's on this call and the other people who can't make it. And we also know some of you are doing extraordinary work as well. And just know that we hear you, we know you. We are here to collaborate with you and help incubate with your projects as well, because we have hundreds and hundreds of people that are engaging with us, and we are continually working on an organization that's able to handle all of that lovely enthusiasm, which Mark will speak of briefly after I introduce my next person, which is Sergio de Cordova. And if any of you know of him, talk about a force to be reckoned with. My friend Sergio, if we started talking about all of the things he did, we'd be way beyond time. So I won't even attempt it. But on the way to Sergio, I do want to call out to another person on the call today who was unofficially the advisor to the chairman and founder, which is me, I guess. And his name is Bjorn Larson, and he's been the Oz behind the curtain all the way through this project with us and has been an incredible help. So I want to just thank Bjorn as well, who is also very involved in this next initiative that I'm going to turn over to my friend Sergio to speak about. And when we talk about leverage points, that's really the segue here, Sergio, is when we talk about, where can we get the greatest amount of impact in the shortest amount of time. Boy, this is a project that is so important that I'm working on with Sergio and that Sergio started. And I'd love to have you talk about that, Sergio, please.
Well, good morning, or is it still morning? Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Lawrence. And also just very excited to be around so many amazing people, from Chantaline to Will, who I've been working with for literally a decade. Mutual friends like Hatan and everyone else that's here listening, and obviously, Bjorn is definitely the Oz. So just really excited, to talk a little bit about the project that we're working on, which is Family Office for Sustainable Development. The whole idea here is, as Will mentioned, and Chantaline mentioned, and Lawrence mentioned, there's been a lot of conversations since before the launching of the Sustainable Development Goal agenda that, how do we engage stakeholders, the different stakeholders? We have the private sector, we have the entrepreneurs, everybody kind of fits into different buckets. And we started to see many, many years ago, and with the UN Office for Partnerships, was really, how do we bring the family offices together, right? How do we bring those leaders that are leading families and the matriarchs and patriarchs together to take action around the Sustainable Development Goals? For about 5 years, I went around the world to present at probably every major family office conference to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, to talk about how this could be a change, not only to address the fact that there is a global agenda that we could all get behind, but also to advance collaboration, also to advance their purpose as a family, right? When we've seen the evolution of family offices, a lot of that has shifted from profit to purpose. A lot of that has shifted from being hidden to actually being upfront and saying, this is who we are, this is what we represent, this is what we're invested in. But ultimately, as we've seen generation Gen Z start to surface with a different brain, a different perspective of what they want the world to be, you see a lot of the family offices also start to embrace this change where before they didn't. Then they're saying, this is what my kids want, this is what my son, my wife, my family, everyone below them wants. And we're seeing also a lot of the transfer of wealth that's happening, and a lot of that is happening with a different vision, different perspective. So what we decided to do was really, once the pandemic hit, we were having a lot of conversations with folks at the UN, led by, a UN Office for Partnership, Mr. Kennedy, and really focused on how can we look at, bringing these family leaders down now to take action. We need them more than ever. We need them to step up and we also need to identify them, right? Because we've hosted a lot of events and there's been hundreds of people, but who is actually taking action? What is the most important part? Who are they? Are we listening to them, or are we just selling them, right? So the whole idea was to really create a platform that, really focused on family offices, not large convenings, rather small conversations that allows us to actually listen, pay attention to what their goals are, see how they're aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, and then educate them about the amazing infrastructure that's called the United Nations. As Lawrence said before, and given his opening speech, when you look at the UN, just celebrated 75 years of peacekeeping, right? Focusing on, the preservation of human rights across, not just human rights on how we live, but how people are treated, how we launch businesses, how governments are run. There is a lot that we've celebrated in the last year. And then when we look at where are we going, what's the next 75 years, right? And we start to say, okay, if we were to look backwards and I look forwards, what does that mean for the planet? And then who are the stakeholders, right? Who are the stakeholders? And when you look at family offices, there's 5.7 trillion in assets that are sitting in the hands of people that actually care about doing good, right? Identifying these people has really been part of, our mission. When we launched the Family Office for Sustainable Development, really, it was really kind of, as a matter of need because of the pandemic, right? But really also starting to look at, once you bring in folks together, family offices together, the importance of creating trusted networks and partnerships to advance the Sustainable Development Goals, and to bring them at high level convenings with high level UN executives so that they also understand not only what the executive office is doing, but what the resident coordinators. If some of you don't know what a resident coordinator, it's basically the folks that are running the UN development program on the ground. So they have a lot of experience. They know who's doing what, where they're doing. And the idea of educating them a little bit more on really what the UN does, not what the New York Post tells you the UN does. And it's just really important when you start to bring the stakeholders together. You know, our mission and vision has really been around objectives that, as Lauren said, was really, and I will give a shout out again to Mr. Bjorn Larson, because a lot of what we looked at is saying, how do we develop an IP that is not only a 10-year platform, but really into the next global agenda, the 2045 agenda. We look at some of the objectives that we're looking at is really focused around educate, engage, and activate, right? Educate, as I said, you know, dialogue directly with UN leadership and through a series of high-level convenings, providing insights exactly on how the system works and how the funds that they're putting to work and impact can be, it's not about how you're putting money to work into the system, rather, how can we make what you're doing faster, right? How can we make what you're doing better, stronger, more connected? So educating folks and listening to them as part of that educational process, right? Then when you're looking at engagement, engagement really looks at, okay, how can we create partnerships? Again, somebody's focused on education, they've invested millions of dollars in the technology, then how do we actually bring that to across the system? How do we actually allow that platform in education to be known by the neighboring communities and neighboring countries? And really, how does that help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals together, right? Together, engaged and inspired with like-minded family offices, peer-to-peers, as well as, you know, folks on the ground that are doing the work. So we're not operating in silos. I think what we've seen here with the pandemic is that we no longer can operate in silos. We no longer can operate without on islands. We need everyone together, engaged, right? And then activate, you know, really how can we create action-focused interest groups where, you know, we've been talking and focused on a lot of families where people are saying, this is what I care about and this is what I care about regionally. You know, yesterday I was talking to family offices out of Australia and Indonesia, and really what they cared about is the ASEAN region. They care about climate, they care about resilience, they care about renewable energy, right? And then they want to know how can they help with their technologies and innovations actually advance the Sustainable Development Goals. But again, they've never been welcome because of the many layers of people that get involved and saying, okay, I can help you. And then, you know, the actual work never happens. So that's pretty much it. I mean, we've been launching a series of events that are focused directly with family offices. And we're excited here to be here with Lawrence and the team. And really, because when you look at, you know, family offices and how they look at the future of investments, not just the future of impact, we start to look at where the future capital is, right? Where the future of investing with purpose and how can we use that force for good? You know, the report that Catan, worked so hard on. I think this is something that, you know, it's kind of like good wine. It needs a little bit of time to make its way across. And I think that what's really exciting about it is if people continue to look at that report, and Chantaline and Will and Lawrence and the team of everybody's collaborated, right? It really, as people start to realize that, oh, wow, he's right. This is right. We need to bring global financial, you know, powerhouses together. We need to bring family offices together. We need to bring entrepreneurs together. It's the future of capital. So I'm just excited to be here. Thank you so much. And back to you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Sergio. Outstanding. Mark, I'm going to hand it right off to you. I will say to everybody that, you know, Sergio, one of the things you talk about, you know, the fine wine of letting things form, you know, things that have deep meaning and deep, long legs that are going to last forever and have deep impact in the world sometimes need time to brew. And, you know, I've said multiple times, I'm going to say it again quick before I turn it off to Mark. And then Mark, you know, we can shorten the end cycle of this for our timing. But there's a great Taoist phrase that I'm reminded of how we've done the leadership of this future capital, which goes like this. Running a government is like frying a small fish. If you poke at it too much, it falls apart. So we've had a lot of patience as this has grown and watched and formed with all of everybody's participation. And now with the clarity of really what this is, we're excited about moving forward. And to that, I'll hand it off to Mark.
Thank you for that. Just a quick diversion. We're getting some really, really great questions coming in through the Q&A. We're trying to get to them all, but some of them are really fascinating, really nuanced, and really detailed. And we don't want to be cavalier with the responses. So I'll suggest two things. Heather and Larry are going to give you the instructions for the after event, the after party. So you can bring some of those questions there. Also, as you can see, there's an email address on the screen here, info@futureofcapital.org. If we don't get to your questions now or in the half hour after, please just reach out to us there and we'll be responsive. With that, I've been involved in a lot of not-for-profit exercises, starting new organizations, sitting on boards and the like, and there's always kind of an impulse for people that are either involved in or adjacent to those organizations to think about the they are doing it, they're responsible, they take care of it. And I really need to emphasize in the case of Future Capital that they is actually we. It's everybody that you see on the screen, and it's everybody who's watching us right now as well. We want the Future Capital initiative to be ever growing, ever more inclusive. And that really gets to the initial points here that we're talking about, which is engagement and participation and membership. It's still early days, so we haven't fully defined what it means to be a member. I think we'll formalize that more in the months to come, but we want everybody who feels like something that we are doing, something we've written, something we've said resonates, to feel like you're a stakeholder. And we want you to feel connected. We want you to feel involved. So please reach out to us through the email. Please reach out to us through social media, through our website. There are a lot of different ways to connect with us, and raise your hand if you have something to say, something to share. You want to help with one of the initiatives we've already stood up. If you've got an idea for something new that we can be doing collectively, all of that. The biggest investment that we can make in Future Capital that will result in achieving the lofty goals that we have is people bringing their time and their intellect and their passion and their consciousness into it. As you can see here, we do have a social media presence. It's brand new at this point, so there's not a lot of content there, but we would ask that you follow and engage us there. We want to, make it rich in terms of content and interaction. Same thing with the website. We've done a reboot on that. It's a little threadbare at present, but we really want to build it out to one of the conversations that we had, partially in the hallway, partially in the room for Future Capital when we were all at the United Nations in September of 19, was trying to assemble essentially a library of Alexandria for all of the knowledge, the data, the wisdom that's already been aggregated and collected by a lot of amazing people and a lot of amazing organizations. But it's kind of all over the place. It's not sitting on one shelf. So we do want Future Capital to be a gathering point for all of those insights, all of that wisdom, so that we're not perpetually engaged in this cycle of, well-intentioned, but doing over what's already been done and already been done with excellence. So we need to learn from what's been done. We need to benefit from what's been done and continue to build upon that. So we really want Future Capital and the resources that we're putting together to be that place, that space. And I think as I hand this back to Larry, that's what I want people to really appreciate about Future Capital, is that it is a space, and we are trying to make it a bigger space, a more inclusive space where people and institutions can come together with a sense of consciousness and common purpose in order to drive these outcomes that we're talking about. We will do where it is appropriate for us to do. We will facilitate where it's appropriate for us to facilitate. But mostly what we want is to provide that space and to provide the nutrients to be able to grow the efforts and the systems that are going to get us out of this deep ditch that we find ourselves in as a global community and a planet right now. So with that, I am going to ask Larry to make a couple of adjourning comments and share the information on how we all get into the midday, I guess, reception for everybody to interact.
Excellent. Mark, I know I'm probably not the only one on this call longing for a physical gathering. Short of that, what we're going to be doing, and I know this is a huge commitment for all of you. So if you can't make it, we certainly understand, but let's just work with the logistics first. Heather, if I could have you once again put in the link. Now, if you could actually copy that so you have it for after we end the session, that'll give you the ability to jump right in. When you come into that screen, you'll be able to just be live with all of us, and we're basically just going to have a conversation. It's not something you have to come to the table knowing what to say, but just an open conversation, so some of these questions can be answered and we can engage in more of a interactive way. I would like to say that, you know, this is the next chapter of Future Capital, and in bringing on Mark Sloss as our executive director, it helps us form a foundation where we can start growing. As we've mentioned, some of our partnerships, we're having wonderful conversations as well with Sergio and Public about how we can move forward in deeper partnerships to inform the breadth of the action-based work that we're convening here, along with United Nations and with Future Capital.
I did actually leave out one important detail that I want to kind of lob in here before you adjourn us. Through our partnership with the World Academy, they've been very good in our fledgling days here to serve as our fiscal sponsor for the Future Capital Initiative. And I mean, it is capital. And as we've discussed, there are multiple forms of capital, one of them being traditional monetary. We don't have a lot in terms of needs right now for cash in order to do the things that we're doing. Participants have been extraordinarily generous with their time and their company and personal resources, but to the extent that you or others around you are inclined to, or you know, really feel motivated to provide some support, there actually is a mechanism to do so through the World Academy. You can find the link both on their site as well as a link to their link on our site. And I see Gary just popped on his camera, so maybe he could actually share a quick moment on how to go about doing that for us. You're on mute, Gary.
As you say, Mark, the links are there, and we operate a special account, which is entirely for using our 501c3 exemption. For anybody who's giving the money, it would be tax exempt donations, and for this account, it all goes to Future Capital.
Thank you so much for that, Gary. Larry.
Okay, well, look at that. We're on time. It's 2 minutes before the top of the hour. I know it's very late in the evening in some places and a lot earlier in the morning in others from around the globe, and we appreciate everybody coming. One of the things I'd like to do just in our last minute, feel free to drop off at any point, but it's kind of a ritual we do with our calls, is to just go into a moment of silence and a moment of contemplation. And I'd like to suggest that you do two things while we do this in our last minute together. Before, once again, make sure in the chat that you copy what you need to copy to come in the after hours. We'd love to have you. But really the first thing is let's send our prayers out to those who have been so deeply affected, not only by the pandemic and the recent shootings here in the United States, but anybody who is going through pain at this time, especially with a lot of this, the crises we have around the world in general, and the fallout of the exasperated separation of wealth due to the pandemic and who that's affecting. And then the other thing I'd like to do is end on a positive note, maybe just keep in your mind, just think of what the world would look like, the future of capital, where everybody is coming together with their thread of their gift, and it's collaborative in whichever way that you see that. So grab the links, let's spend the next minute in silence, And I really appreciate everybody, all these extraordinary beings from around the planet who are collaborating to this absolutely critical work that we're doing to make the world a better place.